My friends, this is the gospel, the good news of the Lord. Praise to you. Do you know that feeling when you start up an exercise, you haven't used that muscle area for a while? That next day you're like, oh, what did I do? Counterintuitively, you should keep moving. You kind of like, I just take it easy today, or just don't exercise and then wait till following weeks and let it go by. You need to keep pushing through. It's the same for faith. Faith is like a spiritual muscle. If we don't use it, it's kind of hard at first. That's why a lot of people say, it's like, I started praying. It's so boring, 5 minutes. I don't know what to do. I can't do it. And so stop. And then you kind of wait until the next time you have to use it. Some kind of crisis comes up or whatever, and people are kind of pushed. It's a spiritual muscle you have to start practicing. And we can also be encouraged by others. Kind of, once again, you can take a physical example. I'll use an example of me, okay? I've been wanting to get out hiking. I was hiking beautifully before I came here, but then here I've been moping around these last 6 weeks or whatever. I was like, it's too hot. Keep canceling my plans. I did go up in Mount Lemon. I told you last week, and I was gonna get out and enjoy it. I had a Dominican brother visiting, and we drove up Mount Lemon, but it wasn't a hike, it was more like a walk. We did the valley trail. It was so easy. We just walked out, saw something, did this. It was a walk, it was nothing. Well, a young couple, some students that I was friends with, they said, like, hey, finally, we're gonna go hiking. Let's do it this Friday. And they took me down to Madera Canyon. And if you know it, you know that trail, it just goes up and up and up. The next day I was sore. That was yesterday. But it was beautiful. Like in the hike, I probably hiked more than I normally would, and didn't bother about the heat or anything like that. It was because other people were pushing me. So it's good. But then you're feeling the soreness. I felt it. It was like, okay, keep pushing through. And once again, counterintuitively, just exercise again yesterday. Get out and do a little walk. Do that, and then you feel a little bit going. You have to develop that habit. Well, the same for faith. We can inspire each other for faith. When you have examples, it's beautiful. Like I've been able to meet parishioners and everything this week. And so I talked to different parishioners. Hey, what does faith mean for you? It was one young couple. They just got their PhD. They've been here. They moved from Mexico and have been here for all this time. They got married. They came here and been living in Tucson. It's hard. They love their families and being far away from their families all these years. But they said, being a new couple, coming here, having a child, doing all this, and now they're graduating and is going to become a professor at Seton College in New Jersey. They're getting ready to move in a few weeks. But they said, without faith, we couldn't have done this. Sometimes it's just hard being on your own. What does this life even mean? Sometimes it doesn't make sense unless you have faith. It's a different way of looking at the world. That letter to the Hebrews says, faith is the realization of things unseen. Realization by faith, you can't quite see it, but you trust it is there. When I just heard that example of faith, it was so beautiful to hear their witness of faith. He said, it's like the engine that keeps us going. It just keeps us moving through our life. It's a beautiful, and I just encourage us. This last Mass, we celebrated another couple that have been here for their PhD program, Kelly and Kevin Cooper. She became Catholic after being Southern Baptist. She just loves Scripture, loves the Word of God and the power of God, be able to pray. She's handed on the faith to so many people in this community. And her husband, Kevin, he's studying optics here and quantum level optics. I mean, you can't even understand what he's talking about. And I studied optics too. You just have faith that what he says is true. I was like, I don't know. You're a doctor. I'll trust you on that one, I guess. But he's brought in faith and science together, and together they've shared and encouraged so many people in their faith. It pushes us, and it's so beautiful. We have this community. We should just be encouraged. I've been asked, what does faith mean to you? How did you get your faith? To hear people's faith stories. Even we have a coffee and donuts after Father Tom's Cafe. You should ask parishioners, it's a good question. Hey, what's faith mean to you? It's a good, let people just answer whatever, because there's many different beautiful definitions that we can have. And how did you make that your own? It's beautiful being in a university community, seeing young people, because eventually in college as the age, you have to claim this your own. You can't get it from your parents necessarily. Although I'm going to share a story about St. Dominic. He did get it from his parents, but then he did it on his own. We always have to make faith our own. I think someone said, God has no grandchildren. It's like the next generation has to do it themselves. They got to claim that faith for themselves. But let me share a story of St. Dominic. St. Dominic, he lived in the 1200s. He's from Spain, so maybe a long time ago, hard time to relate to him. But he came from the middle of nowhere, very deserted place. In Spain, it's the Castile, is a very famous place, but he's from this small little village. It's only 4 square blocks, even to this day. It's this medieval little village. That's it. Very tight blocks. That's it. 4 square blocks. That's it. His father was a knight. Now, what does that mean back then? It was like he was in charge of the defense of the area, but there was never any wars in his area because it was such a small little village. No one wanted. It was alfalfa fields, I think. That was about all they had around them. But he was a knight. He kind of take care, make sure everything was safe. Traveled around city to city, make sure everything was fine. So he traveled a lot. This one story, he was gone on a trip, and St. Dominic's mother, her name is Juana Jane, or Juana de Anza, and she was a very devout woman. And she heard the gospel. The Lord says, give alms, give to the poor. So she fed the poor of her little town. She's Spanish, and they're a Spanish town, so feeding the poor includes wine. You can't have a meal without wine there. To this day, if you go to the main meal at 2 p.m., they bring out a jug of wine, put it on the table. If you don't drink it, that's okay. They're like, are you okay? Do you have a fever? How come you're not drinking wine? Wine is just part of the meal. It's part of it. So she brings out wine, and not only for the poor, she brings out the best wine. Her husband loved wine, I guess. He had the best wine of all the town. Everyone knew about that famous wine that he had. And she gave that away to the poor when he was on a trip. It was like, well, he's not here. We don't need it. So he gives it away. Well, little towns, everyone knows your business, right? So when he was traveling back, everyone's like, oh, Felix, do you hear your wife gave away all the good wine while you were gone? I was like, oh, yeah. He's probably thinking, it's like, yeah, I know my wife. That's it. But he came home, and I think he was like going to tease her a little bit. He's like, that was a tiring journey. Let's have a meal. Let's bring out the best wine. It's like, she's all of a sudden kind of nervous. I was like, I think I've given it all away. She went down and checked on the cellar, and sure enough, it's empty. And she got down on her knees and just started praying. She said, Lord, I serve the poor because that's what you asked us to do. To serve the poor. I gave him the best we had, but I also want to serve my husband. And so for his sake, can you help me out here? I don't want to come up empty-handed. So she got up with confidence and faith. She put her jug out underneath the tap, opened it up, and sure enough, the good wine started flowing. She brought it up, and her husband was dumbfounded. Like, okay. Trusting in the Lord. That's the kind of faith she handed on to her son. When she was just pregnant, not even showing yet. She barely even knew she was pregnant. She had this dream. Freaked her out. She gave birth to a dog. She was freaked out. Not only that, the dog had a firebrand, had a torch in its mouth, and it was lighting a fire. It started a fire. And she saw in her dream, the dog was running all around the world, starting fires. The whole world caught on fire. And she's like, oh my God, what is happening to me? Like, what does this mean for my baby? What is this? And so there's a monastery about 20 miles away. This monastery is called Santo Domingo de Silos. It's a very beautiful monastery. Even to this day, they produce famous chant music. Back in the 90s, it was really popular, the monks of Santo Domingo. And also, a couple weeks ago, there's been a terrible forest fire in that area, and it burned right up to the monastery. The firemen protected it, so it's saved, but it's been horrible forest fires. So she's terrified. She's like, we don't want fires. I don't want to be responsible for this. What does this dream mean? And so she talked to the abbot there, the one in charge. And the abbot heard her story, said, I don't think this is a bad sign. I think this is a sign, something special, your child. I think your child is going to be a priest, and that signifies the fire is God's love. This world has been so cold and become divided. He's going to bring God's love and rekindle that love in the world. That's a sign, I think, that what that means. And so she left confirmed in the child that she had in her womb. And she decided to name him after the monastery and after that saintly abbot, Domingo, Santo Domingo. And that's his name. So he was given that faith from the womb of his mother and became a priest. I think you can't avoid both the brothers. They both became priests. The mom really pushed them, I'm sure. They have another brother that was a knight too, but anyway. The two priests, St. Dominic became a priest, but that was it. We never would have heard anything about him. He worked at the cathedral. He was pretty diligent. He was like third in charge in the cathedral, basically in charge of keeping everyone praying together, making sure everyone's ordered, but never would have had anything published by him, nothing. We wouldn't hear anything from him. He worked in the cathedral. But then his bishop asked him to go. The bishop took Dominic on a diplomatic mission. They had to go negotiate with the government in Denmark. And so they traveled through Europe, and they were coming through France. And they found out the different regions, people have fallen away from Christianity. They have false notions of Christ. They have ideas of Christ that he wasn't actually human. He's just a spirit, and the only thing that are important is spiritual things. And if it's spiritual things are important, so I'm spiritual, not religious, I'm spiritual, then, things of the world doesn't matter. The way we treat our bodies doesn't matter. The way we treat sexuality doesn't matter. And it degrades human condition. St. Dominic heard about this. It's like, what? This is wrong. And they were in this inn. They were staying overnight in the inn. He was talking to the innkeeper, and he believed this. And Dominic was like, no, wait, let me tell you, Christ became human. Christ became human and redeems our flesh. And he spent all night talking to the innkeeper. Probably had a few drinks along the way too. And they stayed all night talking. And by the morning, St. Dominic received him back into the Catholic faith. The bishop was so surprised. He was like, what, you've been doing this all night? He said, we need to get outside of our church. Establish a group that can come out and preach where the people are. Where the people are not coming to church anymore, we need to go out and share the faith in those areas. And in fact, the bishop asked to be dispensed from being a bishop so we can establish this new order. The Pope said, nope, you need to stay being a bishop. But Dominic, he can do it. Dominic can establish this new order of preachers. And so he did that. He started in France. He was going to start there and inviting people to come. There was some young monks. They were kind of like into that, and they were like, oh, let's join. That's a great idea. And they did it for a while. About a year, they all kind of gave up. They're like, this is not working out. We're going to kind of miss home. Let's go home. They gave up. They gave up on Dominic. They gave up on that faith. There were a group of women in that area. They were this heretical group called the Cathars. This group of women, they're really intense on prayer, and they decided to become Catholic again, come back to the Catholic faith. The group of women, they're the only ones who stayed with Dominic for the first 10 years. Everyone else gave up. The women held the faith. It's a typical story. Finally, the men started. It took 10 years. Dominic, he was ready to give up. He's like praying, should I just go back to Spain? This is not working. No one's joining the group. People come for a year and then leave. And so he was praying, sharing his struggle. And while he was praying, he saw this fireball come from heaven and kind of float out in the French countryside and hovered over a building way out in the valley. And he noticed it's the church, and the church is dedicated to Our Lady. He's like, that's a sign. Our Lady wants this. I'm going to continue on by faith and just persevere. And he continued persevering, and all of a sudden people started flocking. All these men started flocking, and they established the order of preachers for that idea to go out and share the faith. So as Dominicans, we have the friars, those men that finally got the faith. Then we're able to go out. We went out to all the universities of Europe. We've been there in Spain and Salamanca for over 800 years now. Went to Oxford, to Paris, University of Bologna. We got all the universities. We're engaging the universities, trying to bring that faith to the areas. We have Dominican sisters. There's people like St. Catherine of Siena. She heard about what St. Dominic was doing, and she was like, wanted to bring it out to her city. She would change the course of politics. People were fighting. She'd go through and change hearts. All of a sudden, politicians started going back to church, going to confession, stopping the wars, stopping that. We have the Dominican nuns, those first ones that follow, and then Dominican laity. Right here in this community, we obviously have the friars, we have the sisters, and we have Dominican laity. Well, all the Dominican laity, raise your hands here. It's like, Okay, so we had lay Dominicans, so living their faith in the midst of their lives, but really intentionally about that gospel message. St. Dominic is said to be a gospel man of prayer, but he's also a man of the Beatitudes. You know, if we practice this faith, we will grow in happiness. Jesus promises all the difficulties. He said, be attentive, be vigilant about your faith, be prayerful. But if you do, blessed are you. How many in the gospel? It just said 2 times, blessed are you. In the Gospel of Matthew, on the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit. The poor in spirit, if you're dependent on God, you're going to be blessed. That means happy, a spiritual happiness. Blessed are those who mourn now. They will be blessed. They will be happy. St. Dominic is an example, and he encourages us. So I encourage us this week to practice our faith. Let's practice our faith in the good times. I said, enjoy these summer moments. These last times of summer, you know, maybe this week we've been inspired as I told stories about St. Dominic, like, oh, he sure likes wine. Sure enough, I could tell you miracles of wine. He made constant wine flow as he shared, but it's a sign of spiritual joy. That's what the wine signifies. But maybe you're having a toast with family, friends. Have a little toast. Have wine. I had that Mexican couple. We had agua fresca. It was so refreshing. You know, have a little toast over that. Agua fresca, maybe some sparkling water. Have a toast in the good summer times. Let's dedicate this time to the Lord, that we all grow together, grow as a family, as friends. Put that together with little conversations about your faith. What's helped you in your faith? You share that one to another. But also, and more importantly, in struggles you might be having or might come up this week. Share those struggles in faith. Share them with the Lord. Practice that spiritual muscle of faith. If something's been hard, something's been weighing you down, tell the Lord about it. Tell the Lord. So one young person, she's like, I just tell Jesus, he's like my best friend. I tell him everything. Something you're struggling with, tell the Lord. But share it in faith. Okay, this has been struggling with me, but Lord, I trust you. You say blessings will come even in the difficulties. Even the thing I don't know how this is going to work out, I trust you, and I trust that blessings will come. But don't do it just one time. Just like exercise, try it a few days in a row. Try it Monday, maybe it doesn't work, it doesn't feel good, you don't feel like anything's happening. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Practice that faith. Just like an exercise program, do it, and the blessings will flow. As we return to this Mass, that blessing comes. You don't hear some beautiful wine on the altar in this pandemic. You haven't had a chance to taste it. That's nice, but there's a piece of bread. There's a little wafer. Jesus becomes present. Jesus' blessings come. We trust by faith that Jesus is here and his blessing comes into your life through this Eucharist that we receive. Amen? A beautiful faith.